Okay, so today we'll begin with Jainism, and before we can begin, let us try to get some of kind of what views you all already have about Jainism. Okay, when you all hear about Jainism, what comes to your mind? Let's try to get a few opinions from the class, and then we shall go into understanding about the religion. So anyone? Okay, non-violence. Okay, so don't eat roots, can we say? Okay, anything else? Reincarnation. Okay, let's come with some good this thing. Okay, so two sects. Mahavira. Who is he? Okay. So Mahavira. Any other things come to your mind? So they are supposed to, in a way, sweep as they go, so to avoid they don't step on some insects or something. So how should we say? So they are mindful while walking. Then, so good, you all have some opinions, you all have some information about this. Let us try to get something more. So first and foremost, we see that Jainism is one of the religion whose origin can be traced back to the 24 teachers. Okay, and these are called as Tirthankaras, which refers to one who establishes a path. Okay, and also one through whom faith is believed to be handed down. So somebody who shows how to get to the truth and also is able to pass it down to those who are there, who come after him, or those who are there around him. Now this term Jaina is said to be derived from jina, and therefore jina basically refers to supreme souls that are totally free from attachment. Okay, so they are free from all feelings of attachment, aversion, etc. Now, when we look at the etymological meaning, when we look at the root meaning of jina, It is said to be conqueror. Now this name is given to the 24 teachers. Why? Because any reason why the 24 teachers would be called as jina? See, first and foremost, we know that the jinas are the supreme souls who are completely free from attachment and aversion. Okay, why would we call them conquerors? Okay, they have conquered kind of the worldly things, like the, for example, attachment and attachment to material things, etc. So, in a way, we see that they have conquered all passions and they have attained liberation. And therefore, we can say that Jainism in essence is a religion of heroic souls okay, who have conquered themselves. So, in other words, they are the conquerors of them own self, and therefore the devotees are called Jaina. Okay, so this is in a way a small kind of an overview of the religion. Now, when it comes to the teachers, okay, how many teachers we said have been there? 24, right? So, the first of them was Rasapadeva, and the last one was Vardhamana, or as we know him, Vardhaman Mahavir. Now, Vardhamana is also known as Mahavira, which means the great hero. Okay, so when we speak about Mahavira, one thing what we know is that he is said to have lived in the 6th century BC. Any great personality who also lived during that time, who we are aware of? Okay, he is said to be a contemporary of Gautam Buddha. And he is the successor of Parvanatha who lived in 9th century BC. So now when we look at Jainism, it also would have had a great deal of contribution to the Indian culture, to the Indian society. So last time when we were studying about Buddhism, we see that through the teachings, through the principles, it gave a lot to the world. Next year when you all have the course on philosophy of education, there also you will see how the Buddhist system of education contributed a lot to the learning process. Similarly also did the method or the model proposed by Jainism. So in this way we see that these religions had a lot to offer to the world. Now, especially when it came to Indian culture, when it came to spirituality and philosophy, these are the two things that we will look into this course, trying to see the spirituality little bit and also the philosophy of Jainism. Now, Jainism is also considered as a Shramanic religion. And what does this mean? This means that it in a way belongs to a group of ancient religious movements that in a way emphasize self-discipline, asceticism and renunciation. So we see that the word Shramanic comes from the root word Shramana, which is a Sanskrit word. And what does this mean? It means, any idea? To exert or to labor or to work. And it basically reflects the intense efforts that those who are practicing it make in order to achieve their goal. Okay? And what is the goal over here? The goal is spiritual liberation. Now we see that these Shramanic traditions, including Jainism, also have a certain few characteristics which are needed to know. Okay, so let's take a look at a few of them. So, first and foremost, Shramanic refers to that whole group of this thing where people practice asceticism and all. The root word is this, which means to work, exert, labor. So, in order to achieve the goal. And what is the goal here? Spiritual liberation.
Is it a religion within a religion?
No, it is a, yeah, in the sense, for example, when we, a group of religions like, na? So for example, all religions which have these practices of asceticism, self-discipline, etc., okay, would come under that category. It is a broad umbrella which includes all the other religions. Or when we have kind of Judeo-Christian or the Christianity, all the other things, Judaism, how you would put them together under one umbrella, like na. So in this way, Shramanic is a name for that. So now, what are the few characteristics? First and foremost, we see that they follow ascetic practices. And what does this include? This will include self-discipline, rigorous self-discipline, which also would include fasting, celibacy, also many forms of self-denial, and all this is done in order to purify the soul so that it can progress towards liberation. Another characteristic or key feature of these Shramanic religions is the emphasis on non-violence. Okay, and we see that central to Jainism is this whole principle of non-violence in thought, word, and deed. Okay, another key feature is rejection of Vedic authority. So they reject the Vedic authority and they rely on their own scriptures and traditions. So the teachings that have been passed down from the teachers, okay, the rules that they have come up with, so they rely on their own traditions rather than following the authority of the sacred texts of the Veda. So another feature is karma and rebirth. As we have seen, actions and their consequences lead to karma, which in a way lead to the whole cycle of birth and rebirth. And another feature also is the goal to attain liberation from the cycle of birth, rebirth, and achieving a state of eternal bliss Okay, so these are some of the key features that we find across these Shramanic religions.
the ending when they have like paradise or what does it mean by eternal bliss?
Okay, so when we look at eternal bliss, one of the ways of looking at it is that when you are completely liberated, in a way you are not affected by any of these small worldly things that affect you. Now, in our understanding, our mind directly goes to paradise because we have learned that, or we have been kind of brought up in that faith. Okay, but we see that bliss in general can refer to anything which doesn't disturb you. So in a tranquil, peaceful, calm state. Okay, so ultimately we see that when you are liberated, okay, you are not affected by anything, that worldly thing which is there. Okay, so eternal bliss would refer to that. When we look at the whole philosophy of it, we'll get to understand a bit more of this.
So for them, there is no rebirth anymore once they achieve that liberation.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that whole thing. Okay. So let's take a look at the origin. So now, as we have already said, asceticism, mysticism, meditation, contemplation, silence, solitude, okay, practicing non-virtue, renunciation, all these are distinguished characteristics of Shramanic religions. Now, we see that Jainism was in a way instrumental in bringing a radical change in the lives of many Indians. Okay, so let's take a look at the origin and development. So, it originated in the 6th century BC, and it was this time that many people were opposing the hierarchical organization and the formalized ritualism of the Vedic religions. So can we try to figure out why do you think people were opposing this hierarchical organization or this ritualism that was there in the Vedic religions? Okay, caste is one. Then okay, caste, then ritualism, yes.
Because of like Sanskrit, well, like Brahminism in Sanskrit, so they wanted to come out of it. Social evils.
Okay, yeah, social evils, that also we can include. Okay, then elaborate a little bit.
I mean, they only want their caste people to come.
Okay. So basically, we see that even when you look at Judaism and Christianity, right? What we see that when there are many things imposed on the people, life tends to become difficult. When there are too many laws, when there are too many strict, rigid structures, life becomes difficult, and it becomes more difficult when people don't understand why they are doing certain things. Same thing can be applied here. First and foremost, we see that there was this rigid social hierarchy. So we see that the caste system, the Varna system we can include over here, and we see that this, as we all know, classified people into distinct social classes, and these had certain prescribed roles plus duties. And therefore, the privileged ones in this whole hierarchy were the Brahmins. Okay, why? Because they also had control over religious knowledge and rituals. So as a result of this, those who were in the lower strata of society, okay, they basically began to feel oppressed by this system, that they were not given opportunities, no access to knowledge, okay, and as a result of it, they looked for alternatives in order to find some kind of spiritual meaning in life and some kind of fulfillment. Okay, so this is one of the reason. Next, we see that complex rituals. So we see that the Vedic rituals which were there were time consuming, they were elaborate, and they were also quite expensive. Huh? Elaborate means there were many, it was complex, and then so many small things. I'll come to that. Okay? So, time consuming, elaborate, expensive, and also it required multiple priests and performance of very intricate ceremonies. Now we see that these rituals were in a way not accessible to the general population, especially those who are not belonging to the Brahmin class. And therefore, since this was the ones who could perform it, since there were only a few, it was restricted only to a few, that also led to a kind of a strong dissatisfaction among those who were the marginalized or at the lower strata of the society, and as a result of it, they could not fully participate in religious life. Now let's move to our Christian faith, okay, and let's try to do a comparison. In Judaism, okay, how many commandments were there? You had 10 commandments, and then how many were they broken up into? There were some 600 odd small rules, rituals which people had to follow. Then we see that the scribes and the Pharisees in a way would impose these on the people. As a result, what happened? So people first and foremost did not understand what was happening, why it was happening. Secondly, we see that it also was, don't do this, don't do that. So many of these do's and don'ts were there. Even for small practices, there were quite complex things, okay, which was not in a way easily understandable. Secondly, you also had certain things which only the priest or the scribes, the high priests, the Pharisees, they had access to. And as a result of it, the people were just like there in order to, they could get anything only through them. So they were like the mediators. Same thing also happens over here. So since you have only a few who can do the rituals, only the few who have access to the knowledge, as a result of it, we see that others are told to do, you have to do to get salvation. Otherwise, there is no way out. So they don't understand, and that is in a way which also leads to a bit of dissatisfaction and discontent. Now next was personal religious experience. So now we see that all have an inclination to get this personal religious experience. All want to have an experience of the divine in some way or the other. So we see that rather than relying on the intermediaries, okay, rather than relying on people who are they mediating between you and God, people wanted to get a kind of a direct access. Because over the course of time, what happens when there are mediators? What is one of the shortcomings when there are mediators? Okay, can we put some other word for it? See, when there are mediators, so for example now, okay, one is in a way control is there. Okay, the whole question of dependency. So we see that, in short, when there is control, when there is power in the hands of a few, they can dictate rules, they can also make changes as and when they want. And what happens is, because of this, the others feel oppressed. Because it is not that they cannot do it or they are not capable of doing it, but because of the system, they are not allowed to do it. Okay, so we see that if the mediators were not there, these people could have direct access towards the divine. But because you have the mediators in between, they have to go only through them. And then we also see that there were certain social changes that were happening during that time. So we had urbanization, people moving to cities, and also because of this, there was interaction between people. When people meet, they begin to talk, there is a sharing of issues, sharing of problems, and this leads to exchange of ideas. Yeah, no, can you be more specific?
Like we go to a place the common that's probably
Yeah. See, I would say, okay, confession you could include in that, but then also, see, for example, mass would be a better example. Okay, confession, yes, sacraments also, you see that if everybody could do it, there would be a direct access, right? Why go through somebody else? Okay, so yes, in that way we can distinguish. Spiritual direction becomes a completely different issue. Why? Because it is not more about taking you to God, but helping you discover yourself. So the whole goal is different there. So that would be a different issue. Yeah, so we see that these kind of hierarchical structures which were there, this formalized ritualism created a sense of meaningless or a sense of dissatisfaction in the people. Then we also see that there was the failure of the Vedic religions to meet the popular needs. So we see that the needs of the people were not met because they had to do something which they felt was not exactly what they were wanting. They wanted something, but they were getting something else. Apart from that, we also see that they had to do a number of sacrifices which did not provide release from samsara, which did not provide release from this whole cycle of birth and death. At the same time, we see that this sacrificing animals and the merciless killing of animals, which was done in these sacrificial rituals, this forced the jinas at that time to provide people with a new orientation and a new interpretation. So as we can see in most of the history of the world, there has to be something which is not going right. Then somebody comes in order to set it properly, in order to liberate the people. The jinas could have had a similar role. There was a lot of dissatisfaction, people's needs were not being met, therefore they decided to give a new orientation to the people. So the jinas wanted to give a new interpretation, and we see that what they did was, in their teachings, they gave emphasis on personal training. They said that salvation is attainable to all. Okay, not like the earlier times, there only few could be saved. All can be saved, provided that people were willing to learn how to achieve it. Okay, so you had to learn the ways to achieve it, plus also you had to put your personal effort. So therefore, personal effort and practice became a very important feature rather than just theories, speculations, and we see that the proof of the validity of this was basically found in personal experience. Okay, rather than some kind of textual authority or logical argument. Now what does this mean? So first and foremost, we see that these ones who thought that salvation was attainable if one was willing to learn, if one was willing to follow the teachings, these teachers were the ones who had practiced, who had tried the method, and it had led them to liberation. So therefore, here you are learning from somebody who has already achieved that goal, rather than from just reading something from scripture where you are not sure whether you may or may not achieve it. This was backed by personal experience. There was enough proof. And that is why we see that the people were inclined towards this. Okay, so we'll stop for today here. Tomorrow we'll continue with the development of Jainism and a little bit about the founder.